Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. We're part of Rotary International, 1.4 million people around the world in 36,000 plus clubs. These are people who get together and they share perhaps a meal or a few ideas and get a speaker. And what we love to hear is about people who are making a difference in their communities, locally, globally, digitally. And in our club, as an online and asynchronous Rotary Club, we have the wonderful opportunity to connect with speakers from anywhere in the world where there's a good internet connection. And we are going to be talking today with Allison Sesso. She is part of R.I.P. Medical Debt. Now, you read her bio coming into this. If you are on our YouTube page, then just go down a little bit below the video. You'll see where that is. Or if you're on our club meeting page, then you'll see it right above the embed of the video. But we are excited to have you here regardless. The story of R.I.P. Medical Debt is one that caught my attention right away, and especially because our President Angelica in Italy, has a real focus on health issues this year. We were very happy that you agreed to talk to us. Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here virtually. Hailing from Queens, New York, by the way.
Excellent. And we are representing both New York and Ohio, in addition to California here in the room. Our paella master, Stephen Shagrin, is a guy who knows plenty of stories about Ohio. But let's well done, sir. And so let's jump into it. Allison, go ahead and tell us the story of R.I.P. Medical Debt.
Sure. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully I do this well. Okay. All right. You see my screen? Yes. Good. Okay, great. So thank you so much for the opportunity today. I'm going to go ahead and launch right in. So R.I.P. Medical Debt views the issue of medical debt as a uniquely American injustice, unfortunately. It is really American exceptionalism at its finest. Unfortunately, it really does prevent millions of people from achieving financial stability. And I think something that's often underappreciated is the emotional anguish it creates for people, which does actually undermine people's health. And I'll get in a little bit to that. But our mission as a nonprofit is to end medical debt. And we think of that in three very unique ways. One, we literally get rid of people's debt in big numbers. We've gotten rid of $8.5 billion of debt to date for over 5.5 million people. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've been able to accomplish that. We have not raised $8.5 billion, I will note, but we do get rid of medical debt for people. So one of the ways we want to be ending medical debt is literally by ending people's individual debts. But we also see ourselves as a solution for hospitals. Yes, hospitals have a role in medical debt, but the system is also broken for them in our perspective. And this gives them an avenue to get rid of those medical debts that are sort of inevitably on their books. And so those that are patient-centered and recognize that if they remove these debts, they'll be adding to people's well-being and health can work with us, and they do. And lastly, we see ourselves as a moral force for greater and systemic change. We recognize that what we're doing is not the final solution, that we're operating in a very broken financial health system. The way we finance healthcare is extremely broken in the United States. And we hope by the mere existence of our work and our efforts to raise the bar on this issue and get people's stories out there with medical debt, that we'll be adding to the conversation and pushing for greater changes that are beyond the relief that we're doing. Oh, sorry. Okay. So there's $195 billion by a conservative estimate of medical debt in the US, 1 in 4 Americans dealing with medical debt. So it is very pervasive and it's significant, unfortunately. Why is it such a problem? Well, it's different than other kinds of debt. It's much harder to avoid if you need medical care and you don't have great insurance, which is sometimes hard to come by, often hard to come by because it's expensive. You can easily end up in medical debt. Even if you're insured, you often end up in medical debt because of high deductibles or loopholes in plans or being out of network. There's a variety of ways that you can end up in medical debt, even if you're doing everything right. If you look at my last bullet here, unfortunately, in this country, getting sick, not being uninsured is the biggest predictor of medical debt. So if the answer is don't get sick, I don't think that that's something that's reasonable to ask of people. Many people don't have any savings to deal with the medical bills that come in front of them. They're, living paycheck to paycheck and adding one thing they just can't handle. Like so many things, it's more prevalent in communities of color. It's the leading cause of bankruptcy. And it is in itself recognized as a social determinant of health, meaning that if you're in medical debt, it means that you probably have more likely to be in poor health just by the fact that you have medical debt. And people delay care because of the fact that they're concerned either about getting medical debt or more medical debt, and because they're already in it. The implications of medical debt are significant. Again, mental health is a very significant part of that. Double the number of days of mental health symptoms when you have this debt. The financial implications, I think people often go to that first, and that's real, not only on people's credit reports, but just trying desperately to pay off even a part of a medical bill can be overwhelming for people. And then there's the physical health. By the fact that you have stress because of the mental health implications, that creates high blood pressure for people. Those are all things that undermine their well-being and their health. And again, as I mentioned earlier, they avoid going to get the care that they need. So their physical situation could get worse as they're avoiding care. And then it's more expensive to actually deal with the problem. We know there's common stories of people, for example, avoiding ambulances and taking Ubers to the ER, or sitting in their cars in the parking lots of ERs, waiting for the pain to subside so they can avoid that medical care if possible. How people are paying for medical bills. Unfortunately, they're putting it on credit cards, which just makes the situation more exacerbated, or using up all their savings, kicking the can down the road, cutting spending on things like food, clothing, household items. Food in particular is a problem because that means that the food that they're buying is probably not as healthy, because more healthy food is more expensive, and so they're undermining their health. Working on more hours or another job similarly undermines your health if you're trying to get better. And even borrowing money from friends and family has proved to complicate those relationships often, which are important to your well-being and can undermine your health. Who's impacted? Again, people of color. Black households, 28% compared to 19% overall, with white households at a lower percentage at 17%, and Latinx at 22%. So this obviously has racial implications. So R.I.P. medical debt is something people can do. That's how we like to talk about our work. It's an action, while we're waiting for Congress to work on bigger solutions and hold our breath for that to happen, we are something that people can do today. We have a very high rating on Charity Navigator, obviously 100 out of 100. So we are a viable solution for people who are interested in relieving people's medical debt today. And we really can make anyone a philanthropist because our unique model yields a 1 to 100 ratio of return on investment, which I'll talk about. So how does it work? Well, we focus on unpaid and unpayable medical debt. People who qualify are 400% of poverty and below, or the debt is large, 5% or more of a person's income. What we do is we go to a hospital and or other healthcare provider, or even the secondary market, which is an entity that would have bought it already from a hospital or a provider. We get that big, bulky bad debt file, which is thousands of records in it. And we've actually created, through a team of engineers that work directly for us, a proprietary debt engine, we call it, that does all this work automatically. So we have this automated system that does a lot of the hard work and heavy lifting in the background. We take that bad debt file from the provider or whoever's selling it. We analyze it and we buy data from an offshoot of TransUnion called FinThrive. And then we identify the people's income and are able to find usually 80 to 90% of the file qualifies under these circumstances. And then we price the debt. What we do is we leverage the for-profit debt buying market, which is, again, pennies on the dollar. And we put the pricing onto those that qualify. And then we present a price to the seller. And then we buy it. And sometimes, it could be $1 million buy, but we'd be buying like $300 million worth of debt, depending on what's within the portfolio. And basically, the price is cheaper as it's older. So the younger debt is more expensive. But again, it's all very cheap overall. Once we get our hands on that debt and once we make the purchase, again, our proprietary debt engine is able to send out letters in mass to thousands of people that qualify within that portfolio, letting them know that their debt's been abolished. And importantly, we connect each donated dollar to each file, right? So each account has a donor attached to it. And so if somebody wants to alleviate debts just in, the state of Ohio, for example, they can do that, and our debt engine can help make sure that their dollar is directed there. This is just a slide to show you how we really bridge these two things. This middle part is the sort of proprietary debt engine, the work that I mentioned at the, just now. The funding comes either from government or from donations. Generally, traditionally, since 2014, when we were founded, we've been funded with donations from either individuals, or lots of churches have been involved. In fact, together, I think they've relieved over $1 billion of debt through donations with us. Foundations, corporations are interested increasingly in our model because of corporate social responsibility credit they get. And then increasingly, government has come to the table to fund our work. And so we use those dollars, and we, again, talk to hospitals and other providers to buy those debts and use that model I mentioned. Again, $1 relieves $100 of medical debt. And this is just a slide to show you what that really looks like. $10, $1,000 worth of face value medical debt, $1 million, $100 million, et cetera. So yeah, we've gotten rid of, as I mentioned, $8.5 billion and counting of debt to date. We've been around only since 2014. Most of that debt's been relieved in the last 3 years as we've grown in more people have heard about us. And we've helped, and the number of 5.5 billion families, I think, is the more important one, because it's a lot of individuals we've been able to support. A lot of attention on what we're doing across the news, and importantly around this issue. And we really try to leverage that to tell the story of medical debt and make sure, again, that we're putting pressure on larger powers beyond us to do something more substantial on this issue of medical debt. These are the stories of individuals. I thought I'd share at least 2 of them. This is somebody, you can see the amount of debt we got rid of for this individual was just a little over $1,000. But she said, I want to thank the people at R.I.P. Medical Debt and the generous donor for abolishing my debt. I am a single mother who works full-time just to make ends meet. Not having this debt hanging over my head is a relief. Thank you again. This gives me the ability to focus on my son and not stress. And then this one, Mia in Dallas, a little over $1,000 again. I opened this letter while working today and almost cried. This medical debt is the last one on my credit report. With ongoing medical and living expenses, I didn't know when I would have the money to pay it. What a blessing. So this is the last part I want to mention is, again, I mentioned that we are connecting our work to bigger changes. And these are some of the things that we think are viable solutions and can actually happen. So one, see this as before, during, and after. Before you walk in the door, we want to make sure you have good, accessible, and affordable health coverage. And that is not always easy to come by, but through the ACA, there's been some subsidies given, and increasingly we need to build off of that and make sure people have good coverage when they walk in the door. Once they get into the door of the hospital, we got to make sure these hospitals have good and clear financial assistance policies in place, also known as charity care, that are accessible and understandable to people. And then lastly, if you do end up in medical debt, there's got to be limitations on what can be done to take that money from you. You shouldn't be able to have your wages garnished easily, or your assets taken, your home, your car, et cetera. And so those are the policy domains that we're really focused on. And that's it. I will stop, and happy to answer questions.
Wonderful, Allison. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I'll quickly introduce the group on the recording. Joining us from Walnut Creek, California is Shags Shagrin of our club, our Paella Master. My name is Rushton Hurley. And Allison, I'm going to jump into the questions by starting a little bit about the history of R.I.P. medical debt. I think one of the reasons that I noticed this in an article and reached out to you about the possibility of a session is that it's quite a story. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, it's a great story. We actually kind of came out of Occupy Wall Street in some ways. In 14 it was officially started, but we had two founders, and Jerry Ashton is the one that was walking around Occupy Wall Street, and obviously they were talking a lot about money inequality, and they had this idea, this group of leaders there, to buy medical debt and to abolish it. And he had a background. He was a debt collector. And so he brought in his buddy Craig, and the two of them sort of did this work with these entities as part of Occupy Wall Street to relieve debt and make a point about, how easy and cheap it is to buy medical debt. And then they sort of did it as a stunt in a way, like they just wanted to make a point. And Jerry and Craig sort of said, wait a minute, we can actually help a lot of people this way. Like, people are willing to give money to this. And their history was in for-profit debt buying. So they understood not only the debt market and how cheap you could buy debt for, but importantly, they understood, they made calls to people. They understood that people were really struggling to pay these debts, and that they really, it wasn't their fault that they had these debts, and it was really hard to do this collection work. And so they set off and started R.I.P. Medical Debt. At first, like any nonprofit, they really struggled to get the word out and people to know about them. And they actually wrote this book and, talked about their work, but, it got some attention, but not, wasn't number one, wasn't being read too widely. And then there was this great opportunity. This board member was connected and asked by John Oliver, who wanted, like, his team, the John Oliver Show, last week tonight, wanted to do a story on medical debt. And she was like, you need to read this book. You need to talk to the authors of this book. So they did. And through them, John Oliver has this famous episode where he actually relieved a bunch of medical debt through R.I.P. Medical Debt. And then the website crashed. People learned about us pretty quickly, and that's how it really started. Some great people came to the board of directors, and about 3 years ago, they decided that they needed to get to the next level. So they hired me as a sort of formal nonprofit executive to bring it to the next level, and I've been actively doing that. And yeah, it's been great.
Well, what a joy to get to be able to work in a field where you're having such an impact in so many different ways. Now, in talking about the response that people have to helping others with debt here in the United States, with our very American problem of medical debt, it is our thanks to you that we learned about $4 and Jared Walker. And we have had him as a program just recently as well. And so this issue that you also brought up briefly in your presentation about charity care, how do you factor in what you do? Because I understand you don't work with individuals, you work with debt buying and work with things that way. So how do you think about the role of charity care and how you make your decisions as a part of R.I.P. Medical Debt?
Yeah, well, so hospitals are, nonprofit hospitals are required to have charity care policies in place, and they do, but there's a lot of leeway that they can have in their charity care policies. They really get to decide what's in them, how they're, what level of income you have to have, how easy it is to implement them. And oftentimes I think hospitals make it challenging for individuals to access them, or maybe, I don't know if it's intentionally, but it is difficult often, which is why Jared's work is so important, which is basically helping people navigate the bureaucracy of applications for charity care. And, frankly, I think hospitals often, they're really built to try to collect the revenue, right? That's the first thing they're going to do. And unfortunately, our system is built to incentivize that. So that's, not necessarily just the fault of the hospitals, I would say. The system is clearly designed to incentivize collection, because it yields more return, and they need to look at their bottom lines at the end of the day and actually exist. And we need hospitals to exist, right? So it's an interesting conundrum. How our program works is, I think, in collaboration with hospitals, because it's our 400% of poverty is usually higher than what most hospitals offer. These are debts that they've attempted to collect on already. It's more generous. The other thing is, it's a fresh look at people. What we do is presumptive, meaning we do the analysis. There's no application for our program at all. We go and we take the person's information. We do run the analysis, find out if they qualify, and we let them know. There's literally nothing they can't have to do at all. They don't have to accept it. They don't have to not accept it. They do nothing and their debt is relieved. So I think I look at hospitals and I think, they should be doing presumptive eligibility automatically. I think that's an important thing for them to do. But also, we're an add-on because we're more generous, I think, than that. And the last thing I'd say is that people's circumstances change sometimes, right? So when you walk in the door, if they did a presumptive check on that individual, their financial situation might not be where they're eligible for their charity care. But then once you've had a medical event, and maybe you lose your job or something happens and you can't work anymore, your situation may very well have deteriorated. And so by the time we come back around a year or two later and look at it, now you might qualify. And that's a cost that the hospitals aren't going to pay for on their own.
I'm curious how the pandemic has had an effect on the work that R.I.P. Medical Debt does. So has that changed how things are discussed, awareness of what you do, anything along those lines?
Well, I think that there is a better appreciation for the need of hospitals because of the pandemic, which I think is really important and real. Often people ask me, is there more medical debt because of the pandemic? And I don't know that the answer to that is yes. I think it's a complicated answer because of the fact that a lot of people avoided care during the pandemic. So less people went to the doctor, right? So that's going to have an impact. Also, there were government subsidies. There was something called the CARES Act that was funneling money into hospitals to help cover some of the costs. It was imperfect in a lot of ways, but it was new money, right? It was kind of government funding for medical care, which we don't traditionally have in the same way in the United States. So it was a new funding source. So I think the pandemic sort of helped elevate the need and the importance of hospitals. It brought out some of the inefficiencies in the systems and some of the ways that hospitals have cut certain staffing, cut beds down, but those are all driven by the fact that they're trying to look at their bottom line constantly. And I think that, to me, that's the big takeaway is hospitals clearly are incentivized by our system to keep track of their bottom line. And that's their responsibility. That is very different than in other countries, and the extent to which that's so important at hospitals in the US and falls in their lap. And I think that's a problem.
That makes sense. I'm curious how there's so much medical debt in the United States. And you get donors, and I'm sure that there are times when donors specify that they want their funding to reduce debt in a particular geographic area or something like that. But how do you go about figuring out which hospitals, providers to work with? I mean, like what are the different factors that help make that happen?
I mean, I just want the debt. Like, honestly, sometimes it's a hospital will call us and say, we're interested in working with you. And sometimes we'll already know of donors in that area that we can, sort of call up and say, like, no, you've traditionally been interested in our model. Can we help fundraise here? Maybe it's a church, maybe it's a corporation, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a hospital and we have to start from the ground up and we say, okay, we're gonna have to figure out how to stand up a fundraising campaign here. And sometimes a donor, will call us and say, I want to relieve debt in my state. And then we'll have to start approaching hospitals. And, so we really do have to put those two pieces together, and it works differently depending, honestly, on people hearing about us.
All right. So let's start winding down some of the pieces. But I also want to talk a little bit about this being an American problem, right?
Yeah.
So, I know that there are plenty of people who kind of take a look at how our healthcare system works and just shake their heads, right? And that we would be building a charitable system to address a kind of an odd feature to our social fabric is something that seems odd. But on the other hand, you're also seeing interesting pieces with how our system works, our financial system works, that makes addressing an admittedly bizarre problem rather interesting. What is it about how the debt collection system works that really inspires people to say, hey, I want to help with this? Is it just the human cost of this? Is it that people essentially are are often people who dealt with death themselves. I mean, what are the motivators for your donors?
I think what we're doing is attractive to people because I think people do recognize that this is not something that you can blame the individual for. I think that that's appreciated pretty broadly. Again, not only because individuals either have debt themselves or have a family member that's had debt, but they've also looked at their bills. So even if you can afford it, you've sort of said, whoa, why is it this much money that's being charged to me? Or they've paid the medical debt, their portion of the bill. And it's, they're doing it, but it's like they've had to cancel the trip to Disney, or their kid can't go to dance lessons that year. And I think that people recognize that what we're doing, especially for people who are around 400% of poverty, like just above poverty but not quite making it there, they don't qualify for Medicaid, there's not a lot of other government programs, inflation is killing people these days, and what we're doing really for a low cost has a lot of impact. Again, $1 gets rid of $100 of medical debt. Like, there's not a lot of other social interventions that get you so much bang for your buck. And I think so both the issue people resonates with people, and our solution really is quick and easy and makes a lot of sense to people.
Well, wonderful. With that, I think we'll wind things down. I'll hand it back to you in a minute for a final word. But for all of you who have joined us and watched this recording, we hope that you are excited by the things you've heard, that you are inspired to think of new ways that you might be able to address needs in your community, and that you keep coming back, because every week we get to talk to these wonderful people. And if you are joining us for the recording, it means you get to keep talking to them even after we press stop on the recording. It's one of the perks of being involved in our efforts to gather programs for the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. Tell others about our club and our offerings. You can find us at rotary.cool online, really. And we hope that you will also let us know that you are here. If you scroll down the meeting page just a bit, you'll see an attendance form and visiting Rotarians. By filling in your email address properly, you'll get a generated email that you can pass along to your club secretary for a miss for your own club if you are tracking such things. Finally, at the very bottom, you will see that there is a space for your ideas. So the discuss form is one where we share our thoughts on what our presenters share with us, but also on anything else that we have in our meeting. You're welcome to respond to people who have commented there, and we hope that that is a space where you find further inspiration for your time spent with us. Allison, as we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. What would you like for people to have in mind as they step away from the recording?
Well, I hope people will support us, ripmedicaldebt.org, and come learn more about our work. And also, just make sure that you talk about this issue of medical debt. A lot of people feel a lot of shame when they have medical debt. And it's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's a systemic problem. And I want people to keep talking about this issue. It's really important that we do something bigger than my existence. And I'd love to, be looking for another job because I somehow solved this problem fundamentally. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. And everyone, we will see you next week.